Hi, good morning, everybody. I am sorry for the slight delay this morning. We had a couple of technical difficulties. I know there's a lot of questions on whether we're going to get started or not, so I appreciate your patience. Just kind of working out a couple of those bugs as we go through this. So we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. Remember, if you stepped out of your office and you might miss a little bit about this, the great thing about it is you can always rewind and watch this from the beginning. So even though we're starting a few minutes late, you should be able to get all of the information that you need. And so just make sure that you go back and go through that. So today, hopefully you all have seen kind of the agenda that we're going to go over today. We're going to cover several different things. So just kind of as an introduction to what we're doing, just to get us started, I'm going to do just a quick little walkthrough on how to set a shortcut on your desktop to any of the documents that you might need on a regular basis. That'll only take a couple of minutes, and then we are pleased to have Jenny Fowler and Margaret Cranny here with us today as well. They're on the call, and they're going to do a little presentation about some of the things that they picked up at this year's annual new conference. They will be joining us, and they will be doing a review of two separate topics, and that's going to be something we're going to see ongoing during the next couple of video conferences, as we had several people that were able to attend that. They're going to be able to share that information with us. We also have Danita, who is trying to join us right now from Douglas. We're having a couple of technical difficulties getting her lined up from there. So right now we're going to hope that she's able to join us and get on the call okay. And then we are also going to finish off with a little quick reminder about address changes. It should only take 10 or 15 minutes. And just some of the things that we want to cover to make sure that we are eliminating any of those address change errors that we've seen pop up in the recent months. So just to kind of get us started, again, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we covered is making sure that everybody is on the same page as far as what documents that they are using on a regular basis. And there's a reason behind this. The reason behind this is sometimes what we see either with the QA process with our quality assurance team or even with quality control and the QC unit is sometimes we are seeing old narratives or old forms that are included in files that have some information that's been updated, and we just want to make sure we're using the same ones. When we had that conversation, one of the things that was pointed out to us is that a lot of people like to set a shortcut on their desktop or somewhere similar just to be able to go and find that form on a daily basis. So narrative, for example, every day I use a narrative, so I just set a shortcut to my desktop and I just click on it to open it. If you do that and you set it just by dragging that form onto your desktop, you'll be able to pull that up just like you did, but sometimes if that form gets updated, you're going to end up with an old form. All right, so I'm just going to walk you through a quick process of how to set up a shortcut that's going to allow you to view that form always in its most current form. So that's a lot of form right there, I understand. So I'm going to kind of share my screen with you. So I've got my desktop over here. You'll notice on my desktop I've got very few shortcuts right now, just because I kind of blanked it out just for the presentation right here, just so you can see what's going on. If then I open up my browser, hopefully you all know how to quickly access the combined manual, right? So if you're in the combined manual, and hopefully all of you are using this feature. If not, this is something that I really enjoy as well, not having to go into the templates drive like we used to, but just go into the combined manual and clicking on forms. It should bring up any of the forms that you might need on a regular basis. So for example, I'm going to use the narrative form for this example right now. Okay, so to open up the newest narrative, I'm just going to click on it, and it's going to bring up the brand new narrative form that I have. So once I do that, if I go up to the top and I click on the address that it's in, it should show up in blue right there. all I'm going to do is click on that, and then if I right click, I'm just going to copy that address so that I've got it saved. So I'm going to copy the address where that is saved, and so I have that now. And I'm going to go back to my desktop, and I'm going to right click anywhere where there's empty space. Once I right click, I am going to go to New, and I'm going to create a new shortcut. All right. So hopefully see right there now on my desktop, I have something called a new shortcut. And it's not really linked to anything yet. So I got to make sure that once I do that, okay, hold on just a second, I had to do a quick change. So once I create that new shortcut, it's going to bring up a little dialog box for me that asks what I want to do with that shortcut. And it's going to say, what kind of item do you want to create? Then I'm just going to go ahead and paste what I've already copied. Okay? And when I hit next, I can name it whatever I wanted to. So if I wanted to call this my case narrative and then finish it, okay, then I will have a new case narrative shortcut again. So just one more time, okay? So when I go into here, new shortcut, then in the dialog box, I'm going to paste whatever form I want it to be. I'm going to call it my narrative, and there's my new shortcut for my narrative. Now all I need to do is when I open up that case and I want to go to the narrative, I click on it, it's going to open that narrative right there for me. And if Danita goes and makes an update to this narrative form or somebody else, it will always bring up the newest form possible. Okay, so if you have questions on that, if you like to use these shortcuts and it's just not quite working for you, if you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date ones on your desktop, just let me know. I can help walk you through that, or we can set it up. But the key is we want to make sure that we're all using the most up-to-date forms. And it will really help not only with our QC and QA process, but just make sure that we're doing everything correctly in our files and tracking things correctly. And there'll be some more stuff that come out on that, just kind of helps to you guys. Okay. All right, so we're going to just kind of go ahead and move along with our agenda items. So I am going to turn the time over to Jenny Fowler. She's in the Cheyenne office, and she's going to be talking to us a little bit about what she picked up in the New Paths Conference about the art of communicating. So Jenny, I'll turn the time over to you.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm out of the Cheyenne office, and this was my first conference, and this was my first year joining as a member as well. And I think mostly what you get out of this is just reinforcement of things you already know, maybe a different perspective, a different way to look at things. And most importantly, we got to connect with all workers across the state, that you see their name occasionally, and you get to be really good friends with and enjoy. And on top of that, we got to see San Antonio. If you looked out from the hotel, it was nice because it was record 100-degree weather all 3 days. So it was really nice to look out and look at the river from inside. So I'm going to be talking about the art of communication, and nothing new as far as what goes into communication and effective communication, but just a real good reminder. And they had speakers from all over the country that spoke on these topics that were, really familiar and experts in this field. So the biggest thing is we did a little exercise where we got together in groups and we drew a circle, and on the outer circle we put down some of the emotions you might have when you're interacting with a client. It might be, or your perspective at least, like they're rude, or they're not paying attention, or they're very sweet, or they're, they're not getting it, or just that surface type of interaction that you're having with them, and as well as they're having the same interaction. They're making judgments on, are you engaged? Are you respectful? Are you, um, willing to help them. So they're making judgments as well on this surface interaction. And then we went into the middle of the circle, and we put down things that a client and as well as us have experienced all the way up until that call in our day. And those things were things such as maybe I had to put my dog down that day. Maybe the client's car broke down. Maybe I got a phone call that I had a $1,000 car repair. You know, maybe one of our kids, the school called and the kids had been misbehaving, or a kid was sick that day. So there was all these unforeseen things that go into the communication that we don't see every day. And we're just making judgments and perceptions, and as well as the background of the client and the background of myself or you, and all that plays in. So you've got life experience, you've got values, you've got your lifestyle, your childhood, all these perceptions that play in, along with what's happening in your life at that moment. And so that was just a really good reminder that to ask questions, and a really good question in an interview to start off is this a good time to talk? And then listening. Listening is really the key, because somebody might say, yeah, it is, but then as you're going on, you're maybe not sure it is a good time. And you can discover that by just listening to some of their answers and their tone. We talked a little bit about that, the hidden dimensions of communication, the content level, the relationship level you have with that client. You really have to build trust, and the way you do that is keep the client informed, follow up, follow through, just establish a relationship in that first interview, and then just, keep your word that you're helping them all along. So we just kind of went through that, which was kind of eye-opening, to not look at just the surface communication, but a little deeper, and really just listening during the interviews for what could really be going on, and asking questions. So does anybody have any questions? That's kind of a little brief synopsis, but it was really eye-opening, and I always think about that still right now. Or even comments on some of the things I said.
That's perfect, Jenny. I really appreciate it. Just a heads up, we're going to give people about 30 seconds right here to make sure if any questions roll in for Jenny that we have time. We're just on a little bit of a tape delay. That's not a Super Bowl halftime thing. They just we're on a tape delay for the presentation here. All right, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and move on, and I'm going to just turn the time over to Margaret, and then at the end there, if there's any other questions that you guys might have or comments related to either of those, we can take some time to look at it. So thanks again, Jenny. I will turn the time now over to Margaret Kenny out of Laramie. So Margaret, thanks again for joining us today.
Sorry, my computer's ringing somewhere. Okay. Got it. All right, so I had a lot of fun at the conference too. Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yep,
all right,
we can hear you.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the C word, cleaning up the dirty language of change. Change is the act of becoming different. The only thing constant in our lives is change. It's not always a bad thing, yet we tend to fight change tooth and nail. Implementing change in our offices can be challenging, but we need to just do it. It's the only way to improve on ourselves and our work. And I have 8 steps to implementing change in the office. The first step is to create urgency, to get people talking about it. You set the tone. If you want others to follow you, you have to lead by example. If you are positive and excited, they'll be excited. If you're a pessimist and begrudge the change, then others will too. Remember, your attitude is contagious. The second step is to form a powerful coalition. Identify the change leaders in your organization or in your office. Identify the weak links so that you can strengthen the organization. Step 3 was to create a vision, to understand the vision. It's really hard to share a vision with other people when you don't understand what you're talking about. And step 4 is to communicate the vision. You need to lead by example, and implementing the change can be one of the most difficult sales jobs you've ever had. Communicate the change often, openly, and powerfully. Step number 5 is to remove the obstacles. You need to assess time, people, and processes that you have available to you. Number 6 is to create short-term wins. Create immediate success to encourage the staff. Memories with an emotional marker have a greater impact. Step number 7 is to build on the change, to analyze the good and the needs to achieve continuous improvements. Set new goals to build on the change. Number 8 is to anchor the change. Talk about the change, share it with new employees, and plan for leadership. The process of implementing change is a continuous cycle that never ends. It's a cycle of reevaluation and goal setting, and through these steps we can continually evolve into a more successful organization. And that was, I really liked that presentation that was given there. I learned a lot at the conference. I really felt like it helped to get to know other people from our state and other states a lot better than we normally do, since we only see each other's names on emails and stuff. So I felt like it was really a good learning experience to go. And any questions?
All right, perfect. Thanks, Margaret. Appreciate it. Again, can you hang out for just a few minutes while we see if there's any questions or anything roll out in? We really appreciate you guys, both you and Jenny, taking the time to kind of share that with us. So again, we're on a little bit of a tape delay, so if you have just a few minutes, we'll have you hang out. Okay, so here's a question that came across. This is actually from Roxanne, so she's joining us. Do you or any others on the conference have any ideas for change and how we can help support that? So again, do you or any others on the conference have ideas for change and how we can help support that?
I think for me, where we're always implementing new policy or new interpretations of the policy, there's just constantly change going on around us that we just need to be ready to jump on the bandwagon and implement it constantly.
And I think that's good as well. I think one thing we know about, really anything in life, but especially it seems like this job, one of the few constants is change. So being prepared for that, being able to make sure that we keep on top of that, that's a really good suggestion as well. If anybody else out there has a suggestion or another question, feel free to add that into those questions box, and I will make sure that we kind of address those at the end of the presentation. And with that, Margaret, I'll say thank you again, and we'll keep moving along with our agenda. So thanks again, Margaret. Appreciate you being on the call today. So next on the agenda, hopefully we've got Danita squared away and joining us actually from the Douglas office. So Danita, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
I'll turn the time back over to you.
Change. I have some changes to go over. You guys already know about all of these changes, but I wanted to first talk about the ABOD changes, and as you guys know, we restarted the ABOD clock October 1st. So all of the previous ABOD months prior to October 1st are gone. So they're still showing in epics, but they're not counting at the top of epics towards the 3-month count for the free or the extended months. We do need to make sure that they are still in epics from previous years prior to, well, not necessarily years, but previous to October 1st, because if another state calls us and asks us when clients use ABOD months, we do need to look back. So that's really all I have to say about the ABODs. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and type them in. And Kelly, should I move on to talk about the other thing and then kind of go back?
Yeah, I think let's just move on. And if you can stick around for a few minutes, then if any other questions come in, we can make sure we address them.
Sure. Okay. And then the other thing I just wanted to talk about was a policy clarification that came out, I think, about a month ago. It was in section 506 of the combined manual, and it was about household composition. And I was just asked to kind of go over one specific piece, and that was the part that says, it's in 506 right after number 5, and it says other household situations, persons who do not eat 51% or more of their meals a month with a household are not considered to be household members. This may include members of a household who travel regularly away from home, such as traveling salespersons, over-the-road truck drivers, etc. And then there's an example in there, and this is why this was clarified, is we had a grandparent that was claiming a 10-year-old grandchild for their SNAP benefits, but the grandchild lived with the dad during the week, and but they claimed that he was living with the grandparents on the weekend. So we were, you know, our policy wasn't really strong on that, so it was okay to do at that point, but we wanted to get that firmed up a little bit because that shouldn't be something that we should be allowing. We need to make sure that if somebody's trying to claim a child, that, or anybody, that they at least eat 51% of their meals a month with that household. And just to clarify, that does not include children when they are split between households. So we've already talked about that a lot. We know that that is okay if it's less than 51% of the time. If they're split between the two parents and the parent that has a child more than 51% of the time is not on benefits. So I hope I didn't confuse the situation. The main point was if it's somebody other than a parent trying to claim a child, they need to have them more than 51% of the time. So there were no questions on ABODs. I'll wait a few minutes to see if we have any questions on this.
So can I'm going to actually ask a question that a few people have asked me on that, and it goes to kind of the traveling salesman example, so maybe you can elaborate a little on that. I think the one that we get the most, that I've heard the most, is maybe somebody that's working, husband works on the oil field and is out of the house over 50% of the time, but then is the large contributor of income towards that household. How should we look at that situation, Danita?
So that's a great question, Kelly, and I think we probably have that a lot in Wyoming. We have a lot of husbands that probably work in North Dakota or other jobs like that. So we do need to count that income, whatever income he's contributing to the household. We do need to count that income towards the household. So we need to be asking, first of all, about bank accounts, and if there's joint bank accounts, and if there are not, we need to ask how much money he's contributing to the household.
Perfect, thank you. And then one of the other questions that came in is if you have two parents, if two parents have the children 50-50, so I know this is something that we've addressed, but can you talk a little bit about that 50-50 arrangement and how we want to treat that?
Well, we first of all let the parent who comes in first claim the child, and then if the other parent comes in to claim, then we would really, I've personally never seen an exact 50-50 situation. So if we ever have one, then certainly I'd love to work with whoever asked that about it, but usually children aren't split exactly 50-50. Somebody has 51% usually in those situations. Did that make sense, Kelly?
Yes, I think that made sense as well. Okay, and then Jackie asks, do we count income as UNIN income? And I'm believing this is referring back to our example with the oil field worker.
Yes. If whatever amount he is contributing to the household is unearned income.
All right, so if you'll stick around just for a couple more minutes, we'll see if any other questions roll in. But I think those are great clarifications and a couple of the questions that we've come in, or I've seen come in as well. Just kind of as a side note and a plug, just also make sure Danita does a really good job of adding some of these examples to the combined manual. So when you're looking at some of these policy changes or information, if you don't quite understand, if you look at the bottom of a lot of these sections in the combined manual, you should see in blue text some of that information show up or some of those examples show up. So just kind of be aware of that. And then if you still need further clarification, please use us as a resource. You can either email Danita or myself. We'll make sure that we try to address any snap changes. And then if you have power questions, again, Corinne Livers will be able to help you with those. So thanks again, Danita. I don't see any other questions that have come up. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so just before I move on, I'm going to go backwards in time, and this will happen once in a while with this format. So Corey made a really good comment going back to the changes portion that we talked about with dealing with change. Corey Silrud mentioned that she said, I think more people are adaptable to change when they see someone make a change and not struggle with it and have a positive attitude about that. So, and I think that's a really good way to look at changes, is just partially our attitude as well. And then Tink asks one more question about what Danita just went over. So if a spouse is an over-the-road truck driver, then their income would count, but they would not be included in the house because they're gone 60% of the time. And I think that's the really good example that goes right along with that example that Danita covered with the oil field worker. If they're out of the household the majority of the time, we're not going to count them as part of the household, but we would still need to look at that income. So that income could be included as unearned income towards that household. So make sure we're doing thorough interviews with those things and narrating exactly kind of those responses, looking for that 51% of the time or more. I know that's a change in how we've done with that in the past. And so going with our theme, we're going to have a positive attitude about that change, but that's a really good question as well, team. All right, so just kind of moving along. I know there's a couple more questions that we might touch on just at the end. If not, we'll send out some clarifying information as well. So the last thing that we're going to cover a little bit is on address changes. And we'll just I'll just be frankly honest. I know that this seems like a very simple thing, and most of us should know how to handle an address change. And I believe most of us do know how to handle an address change. But the reason we wanted to talk about this a little bit today is because we've had a few examples in the recent months of errors that have come across because of failure to address address changes correctly. And so I just wanted to do a quick recap of some of the things that we need to be aware of when we process an address change. Maybe a couple of things that might change the way things are done in your office, but hopefully most of it is all old hat, and you won't see anything here that is going to be a big revelation. So, with that being said, I put together a little kind of a tip sheet that I will be emailing out to everybody that you can use just kind of as a quick reference to how to make sure address changes are processed correctly. Again, the whole idea behind this is just to make sure that when we process these address changes, that we're not missing something that could cause an error later on. It's one of those really simple things that can cause a big headache if we miss a step. So so just a couple of things. Address changes, really it's a list of do's and don'ts, to be honest with you. So there are a few things that are do's when it comes to address changes. So whenever we receive a report of an address change or we do an interview, we want to make sure that we verify that that address is correct. So every interview that we do, we should be going through and just verifying that address information, not only that it's correct on the application and we can verify that verbally with the client, but that also it's correct in the Epic screens. So one of the challenges that we run into, and I will freely admit being one of the guilty parties, is as you go through the verification process of Epics, you know that in the final screen where we authorize benefits, there is a question that asks whether or not you want to verify that address. And as you all know, if we hit yes on that, it takes us directly to the address screen. But the problem is it doesn't authorize that case. So a lot of times workers will go through that quickly and forget to double check that that address is correct. So make sure that you have a process in place to double check that address and make sure that it's correct during each interview. So also make sure that reported address changes are processed timely and correctly. So address changes many times aren't always reported directly to the caseworker. Sometimes we get address changes that are reported to somebody at the front desk or somebody else in the office. We've had cases as well where somebody has called the state office and reported an address change, and we get verification of that, or we get notification of that through an email or a phone call. However we get information on that address change, we want to make sure that it's still processed correctly. So we need to make sure that we make any related adjustments to that address change, including pending for verifications. So if we get a call from the state office stating that one of our clients has an address change, we still need to follow up with that client to ensure that their rent hasn't changed, or their utility information hasn't changed, or something else in that household hasn't changed that we need to be aware of. Okay, and then also, even with something as simple as an address change, we want to make sure that everybody narrates that information in either a change narrative or in the application narrative, to make sure that if somebody else picks up that narrative or that case, they can look and see each address change, when it became known, and what action was taken with the case. So a few of the things that we want to make sure that we avoid with address changes. One, we don't want to mail denial or closure notices to the incorrect address. This has happened a couple of times, and it really is a matter of just making sure we take the time to make sure that the address is correct in Epics before notices are sent. So I know this has happened a couple of times where things have just slipped through. We've sent out a closure notice because somebody's moved or something has changed, and so that closure notice has gone out. We want to make sure that that information is correct in Epics before it's done. We also don't want to rely on the front desk to make all necessary address changes. So many of you guys have people that are the clerical staff that help out with, for example, case registration. It's absolutely okay that they put the address information into those, but we don't want them to process those changes, simply because of the fact that we need to make sure that to look at each case individually to see if an address change may affect something else going on with that case. All right, so it really is up to us as benefit specialists to make sure that we have all the correct information, including that address. So if a change is reported in address to either somebody at the front desk or somebody else in your office or even somebody at the state office, it's still our jobs to make sure that we follow up and make sure we have all the correct information in that case. Okay, so if you have a situation where some of that information is unknown, for example, somebody moves and you're not sure if their rent has changed, and you're not sure if their daycare travel has changed, one thing we want to avoid is sending blanket or unclear pending notices. So an example of that would be a pending notice where I send out an F301 saying, hey, if your rent has changed, please make sure to bring me verification. We do not want those to be unclear to the client. So there is an answer for that. We just don't want to send out a blanket request for information. We want to know what specific verifications we need to request and request those in a pen notice if that's what's needed. Okay, so address changes and power. So this is just kind of going along right along with what we've talked about with address changes. But with any power case, just remember that address change can also affect the shelter supplied or shelter included benefit amount, and we need to make sure that's correct. So not only can it change eligibility, but it also can change the amount that a client may receive depending on whether they receive the shelter supplied benefit amount or that shelter included benefit amount. And also, since those payments are manually, or that those payments are mailed to the clients, address changes are really critical. We need to make sure that those are correct so that a power payment is received in a timely fashion and it's mailed to the correct address. Okay, so other changes that can occur, so if we get an address change, some of the examples of other things that we need to make sure are correct are their shelter costs. So for example, rent, mortgage, any type of utility payments, those may change with a change of address, so we need to follow up on that. Household composition can change in the event of a move. We need to make sure that we ask the appropriate questions. If somebody has moved in with somebody else, we need to ask whether or not they are going to be purchasing and preparing separately or together. We also need to make sure to address child care travel costs or medical travel costs. So a move can change the amount of miles somebody drives their child to daycare each day, or the amount of time people spent visiting a doctor's office or going to pick up their prescription medications. There may be other changes that you run across. Please make sure to address all of those along with that address change. So for an example here, and I just kind of put together this based on actually one of the errors that came across our desk that we reviewed, is after a lunch break, you might return to your office and find a note on your desk indicating one of your SNAP clients has changed her address. The note includes the name of the client and the case number and her new address. What steps do you need to do to ensure that the ad is processed correctly? So quickly, you need to make sure to use the information on file to call the client and verify if anything else was affected by that address change. So the key here is follow up. Sometimes with an address change, you're going to find that their phone number has also changed, and you may not be able to get a hold of them by that phone. If that is the case, we still need to pend for that information, but we are not going to use a blanket pen notice. So we can use the F304, which is a penned request for contact notice, and send that to the new reported address. If you do not know if you need to gather additional verifications, make sure you use that request for contact, and the client should contact you, and then you can find out what specific information you need to pen for. So make sure you do that. Address should be updated in an ADDR screen. And then once we do that follow-up, if there are any additional verifications or changes, then we should send the F301. And then after that is done, make sure you create a change narrative detailing your actions and include them in the file. So again, I understand that hopefully most of this is all old hat. And so I just wanted to make sure that we did that review. Sometimes it's just a matter of making sure we just take the little extra time to cover all of our bases, you know, dot all our T's and cross all our I's, or however you want to do that, and just make sure that's correct. So if you have any other additions to that or any other questions, please let me know. With that, I know Danita kind of is back on the call to just cover one more additional thing, and I will be watching for any other questions that come in. So Danita, I'll turn the time back over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just have one quick reminder, and it is about when you're mailing a JP Morgan card to a client that has a care of address. We need to make sure that it has the care of person on the address line in Epics. What we're finding is that those cards are being returned when there's no care of address or care of name in there. So example, the client's name is Bonnie Johnson. We need to put the CO, no symbols in there, just the CO. The person she's living with is Judy Johnson, and then the address. So again, just make sure you put that care of name in there. If the client doesn't want to tell you who they're living with, then you just need to ask them, please do let me know who you're living with, or else you might not get your card. So that's just an important reminder, because we're having so many cards being returned to JP Morgan because there's no name for that care of in there. So that's all I got.
All right, thank you again, Danita. Okay, so the last thing that I would just wanted to cover is just a few of the upcoming things that we might have available to you guys for training tools. So I really want you guys to know that we really hear your suggestions, and we try to make sure that if you feel like there's either a gap in training or something that can help you do your job better and easier, that we try to work on those things. So there are a few things that I wanted to kind of point out. So one is more of something that we've seen come up through you know, the QA and QC process, where we've seen needs that arise, and that has to do with some of the trainings that we do in these regular meetings. So one of the things that you'll see come out is just a tip sheet, just kind of reminding you of things that you need to look at if you ever receive an address change. So hopefully, again, this will be things that are ingrained into your mind, and you won't have to worry too much about that. But this address change sheet will come out in an email later today, so you'll see this tip sheet, something that you can use if you have one of those, a cheat book that you use for training purposes or reference purposes. You can throw that in there. Another thing that you should be seeing very shortly is going to be another toolkit, and I know we're using that toolkit term quite often, but the idea is, again, is to put tools in your hands that you can use, and the toolkit that we will be releasing is going to be a notices toolkit. So we know that many times we have confusing notices, or we're not exactly sure which notice needs to go out to a client. So hopefully what you'll see is a document that you can go through, find out which notice you need to send, that will really detail those notices out a little better for you, and we will be covering that together at a future date as well. So that's another tool that should be coming out. And then finally, we've had a lot of requests for more direction on how to treat power and power interviewing specifically. So we've been working on a video, and I'm gonna, you know, we have a few people in our division that have really helped create a good training video or walkthrough on how to conduct a power interview. So that will be one more resource that we'll be releasing later this month that you'll be able to see. Okay, so that's it for announcements. I'm going to kind of go back and just, now that we have a few questions pop up, just make sure that we have those all covered. So one thing, Mary, going back to processing those cards correctly, Mary Zuber in Riverton mentions that it's important to see if there needs to be an care of on the address as well, and refreshes that. And then can you see these as well, Danita, these questions? Okay, so one other is Brandy says if there is no in care of, they will still get state mail, but they will not leave the card. So sometimes your clients think that they're getting state mail. They may get something without that in care of, but what they will not receive is their card. So be aware of that. Just because somebody's gotten some mail doesn't mean that they will get all of it. Okay, so with that, I'd like to thank again all of our presenters today. So Jenny Fowler and Margaret Cranny and Danita as well. So thanks again. If you joined this call late and you missed out on the first part because your screen was fuzzy or because we started a little late because of technical difficulties, There will be a link posted back on here, so you can view this in a couple of different ways. You can go back to the same link that I've already sent out to you, and you can go and click on it, and it'll be a recorded video of what went on today. Also, you can go on YouTube, and there will be a link to a YouTube video. If you've joined my channel or are you following the DFS training community on Google, this stuff will also be posted there. So just be aware of that, and know that if somebody's out of the office or missed the first part of that, we can get that all taken care of. Okay, well, thanks again, everybody, and with that, we will finish for today, and we will see you guys all again for the same format in 6 weeks. Thank you.